You're listening to ReachMD, and this is Dr. Matt Birnholz. I'm joined by Dr. Nicholas Gross. He is a volunteer staff physician at St. Francis Hospital in Connecticut and emeritus professor of medicine and molecular biology at Loyola University in Chicago. Dr. Gross, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
So, Dr. Gross, just to start, give us a sense of your upbringing in medicine, your interest, what got you involved in the particular fields that you found yourself, from pulmonology to molecular biology. Sounds like a widespread within the medical field.
Yes, you could say that. I started life knowing that I wanted to be an academic, so I went into internal medicine, and I happened to have a couple of professors who were very influential in my early years, and one of them happened to be a pulmonologist. Another one was a cardiologist, so I actually went from one to the other more than once. I had a full cardiology residency, and then I did a full pulmonary residency. And my hospital at that time needed a pulmonologist, so I became a full-time pulmonologist. And I've been a pulmonologist ever since. So that's really been my career. I picked up a PhD in molecular biology because, again, I wanted to be an academic and do research. Research was a great passion of mine. And it was clear that you had to have the right credentials to get funded and nice big grants from NIH and so forth. So I got myself a PhD in molecular biology. And I actually did research in the molecular biology of lungs, particularly surfactant, the problem with premature babies, as I'm sure you know. And I spent quite a few years doing molecular biology of the lungs. And I only really stopped about 5 years ago. After a long string run of getting nice grants from NIH and the VA system as well. Now I confine my interest mainly to airway disease, COPD, and asthma particularly, of course. And I still actively seeing patients. I do a lot of reading of the literature and follow what's going on in the pulmonary department. I write a column that's published bi-monthly in a specialty journal called COPD, and the column is called the COPD Pipeline, and I do a lot of work finding out what different companies are doing with their research activities, trying to alert the specialists, particularly the pulmonary specialists, as to what's coming down the line and where it will be in terms of the developmental process. So that occupies me quite a lot. That's one of the reasons why I come to functions like this, because I can always talk to people and try and get information out of them that is not published by anybody else.
Well, it seems as though we're in the wrong chairs then. You should be in my chair here. It seems like you are actively hunting down, as any interview host or reporter would.
Certainly, that's part of the job.
So tell me a little bit about that publication. What have you found as of late to be in the pipeline? What has gotten your attention?
I'm interested in things which are probably just over the horizon, 5 years away, for instance. There's a lot of stuff written by drugs that are about to be published and about to be approved. I was writing about Noro and Brio, not with those names, but the actual components of them. 4 or 5 years ago, I was writing about roflumilast as soon as I heard about it, which again was long before it was approved. And Tudorza, likewise, I've actually was one of the researchers for Tudorza as well as Dalaresp. So what's coming down the line now, unfortunately, is very largely combinations of the drugs that we know very well for many years. In other words, they're ICS, LABAs, and LAMAs in every conceivable permutation and delivery mechanism you can think of. There are relatively few of them right now, but I'm sure that in probably 2 or 3 years we'll have at least 4 ICS LABA combinations, new ones, 24-hour drugs. And in the further horizon, we'll probably have a triple combination, that's to say, an ICS LABA and a LAMA, all in one package. And that will be the standard drug that everybody, inappropriately, as many of them will actually receive, because it's so convenient. A once-a-day drug that contains all the medications that patients could conceivably need, that will be the one that everybody is getting. But it'll be some years before that's available because the FDA has quite strict rules for developing combinations, and it's going to be difficult for any drug company to put 3 agents together, having done the dose response for each separately as well as in combination. So there are big hurdles for the companies to jump over. Other than that, we have phosphokinases being developed, particularly for dealing with the inflammatory component that's present in airways inflammation, both in COPD and asthma. Particularly in COPD, we need new treatments for airways inflammation. Asthma is a different type of inflammation, and it's treated very well with corticosteroids. So we have good drugs for asthma. The problem with asthma is largely compliance. Patients who should be taking it, particularly young patients, on a regular basis, they stop taking their steroid as soon as they get better from an exacerbation, and then they come in 3, 6, 12 months later with another acute exacerbation, and we find they haven't actually been taking any corticosteroids by inhalation for many months. So that's the big problem with asthma, but this is COPD is a different problem. It's a different type of inflammation. The pro-inflammatory molecules are a different group altogether, and they're not really amenable to steroid inhibition. So we need to develop new, probably unique anti-inflammatory agents, of which we don't have enough at the moment. I think actually roflumilast is probably one of them, and I would like to see it developed as an anti-inflammatory agent, but unfortunately it's very difficult to get the FDA to provide and accept that kind of indication without the science to go with it. And it would take a very big and long study to show that roflumilast had an anti-inflammatory effect, but I sincerely believe that it does. But we need quite a lot of other agents to be in development as well. I was hoping that statins would be one of them. It's anti-inflammatory in some ways, but turns out not to be anti-inflammatory for COPD, which is a big disappointment.
I think it's a surprise to many listeners to hear statins equated with any lung disease at all.
Right.
It's interesting that it was being researched. Why is that?
Well, it does have anti-inflammatory properties in other organs, and it's almost so effective that it should be in the drinking water. But it's really because there are so many different types of inflammation that statin can work well in the inflammation that's present in vascular diseases, but it doesn't work well for patients who have airway diseases, the inflammation of airways diseases. I was hoping it would be, because then it would be very easy to switch over to using statins as well as our other treatments, but it turns out not to be the case. Why it doesn't work in airways diseases? The only answer to that is because somehow it doesn't address the pro-inflammatory mechanisms that are present in COPD, like it does in vascular disease. It's unfortunate, but it happens to be the case.
What are the inflammatory mechanisms within COPD or inflammatory air disease as compared to other organ systems?
If I knew that, I would be on my way to Oslo to pick up the Nobel Prize. That's the big question. We just don't know. People are looking at it, looking for different disease mechanisms. Basically, COPD is not just one disease. It's really a whole range of diseases. Some address the airways more than anything else. Others address the lung parenchyma more than anything else. And there are other aspects, too, which are essentially unique. So if you take a multifactorial disease like COPD, you're not really going to end up with one mechanism. It's going to be a whole group of mechanisms. And I suspect that what we'll actually find is that treatment, let's say an investigational treatment, X will work quite well in a certain proportion of COPD patients, but not in others. And so it's going to be, the disease itself is going to fall into multiple different varieties. Rather like, say, diabetes. You know, we have type 1 and type 2 diabetes, which are quite different in terms of their mechanisms. And if you tried to lump them together and use one drug for all of those diseases, you would find that there would be quite a few patients who didn't respond to your anti-diabetic medication. And people might even say this drug is going to get the thumbs down because it doesn't work for everybody. But the drug, and the same thing would apply to COPD, is that your miracle drug will work very well in some patients, but not at all in others. And the real trick is to recognize which patients are the ones who are responding well, and to develop the drug specifically for that subgroup of COPD patients. And this is not welcome news to the pharmaceutical companies because they want a drug that will do for everybody. And so the whole world will be able to take their drug and they'll make lots of money that way. Nothing against making lots of money, of course, but it's not going to be possible in the future for many of the diseases we grapple with right now, cancer being really the archetype of that. I mean, if you imagine that all lung cancer or all ovarian cancer are essentially going to respond to the same treatment, you're not going to be able to develop any drug that benefits every patient with that disease. We're facing that problem with COPD.
So like the tenets of many personalized medicine advances, the one-size-fits-all algorithm doesn't work for COPD.
Absolutely correct, yes.
So COPD seems to exist within a spectrum
Yes.
as opposed to a defined unilateral disease, which sounds like our current defining of COPD is incorrect then.
As defined as a single agent, a single type, that is an error, yeah. And people know that. People know that. It's difficult to apply that, though, to pharmaceutical developments, because, again, pharmaceutical companies, these are very expensive drugs to develop, and certainly for COPD, to get through the FDA, you're probably going to need multiple studies involving many thousands of patients for at least 6 months, and more likely a year or 2 years or 3 years. And those are very, very expensive trials to run. It takes a lot of conviction on the part of the scientific side to get a pharmaceutical company to spend enormous amounts of money on drugs that may fail completely. You know, we've just done statin trials in COPD, which showed really they don't work for COPD. And can you imagine the amount of money that was spent on doing a 1-year study with 2,000 patients? It takes a good deal, and the reason why it could be done is because statin's such a successful drug. It's already made gazillions of dollars, and okay, so this is really not such a big a pot to put into this. But if statins didn't have a very good market already, I couldn't see anybody doing that kind of study.
Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, the combination drugs that you speak of that are on the horizon are in a much different position.
Very much different position, because we've got Advair and we've had Symbicort some years now, and they've done very, very well. And they take the same components and put them together, maybe slight difference. You use Floridil instead of salmeterol as the bronchodilator. And you've got Symbicort, whereas GSK has Advair. And so it's not a big deal to take a well-known beta agonist and a well-known inhaled steroid, put them together, and make a new combination. But does it advance our treatment of the disease? Not really. We like to have alternatives in the prescribing department, and so we'll have other ICS-LABA combinations, and we'll have ICS-LAMA combinations, and we'll have LAMA-LABA combinations, one next door to Noro, a very good drug, which actually I think does provide a better answer to patients who have appropriate types of COPD. But if they've never had an acute exacerbation, they shouldn't have an inhaled steroid. And that's what we've lacked as a single agent until now. Noro provides us with 2 bronchodilators without the presence of a corticosteroid. So for patients who've never had an acute exacerbation before, that works very well. I like adding roflumilast to that as well because that also reduces acute exacerbation. So when patients do start to have acute exacerbations, roflumilast is the right agent, but it's not approved. If it didn't have that, it wouldn't be approved, and one wouldn't be using it according to FDA if the patient never had an acute exacerbation in the past. So Anoro is an advance, but it still only uses agents that we're very familiar with. And in terms of adverse events, you really have very few concerns for a drug like Anoro because we've had long-acting beta agonists for a long time. We've had long-acting anticholinergics for a long time. And so we have very little difficulty convincing the FDA that Anoro is going to be safe.
Now, we've focused primarily, and with good reason, on the pharmacologic side of treatments and what's on the horizon. What about non-pharmacologic therapies? What's on your map?
Well, the biggest one, of course, is smoking cessation. In fact, that's one area where there is really a lot of activity going on. Fortunately, I think, too, largely because Chantix has done so well. And again, other pharmaceutical companies look towards doing well and try to emulate their drug because, first of all, there's less risk involved, and second of all, it's easier to convince the FDA because they know what the FDA will accept in terms of an approvable drug. And if you have a front runner for that, then that simplifies the development process. There are actually 15 drugs in development for smoking cessation, most of them based on a Chantix-type model, and everybody wants one of those drugs because Chantix is doing very well, and I hope they all succeed, to tell you the truth. But there are other smoking cessation devices and treatments that are also being developed. That's probably the most likely new development in our field of all. As far as treating the disease itself, there are actually several hundred in early stage development. That's well preclinical. But most of them, if not all of them, will drop out before they get to the clinical stage. Occasionally, a few of them do get through them. Of the 200 or 300 in early stage development, that's to say preclinical animal studies, they are showing benefits for models of COPD and models of asthma, but all but a very few will die in the clinical stage. And those who make it through the phase 1 will die in phase 2 because it's very difficult to, again, and expensive, to put enough commitment into doing a third phase 3 study if your phase 2 study is not absolutely convincing. So companies will go to phase 2 because they don't involve a large number of patients, and they're relatively short run for the most part, 2A and 2B, both relatively short. You get your answer fairly quickly. And if they don't look really good, the drug company's just not going to do it anymore. So they die in phase 2, and at the moment we don't have any really original drugs in phase 3 for COPD. It's a sad comment, but unfortunately that turns out to be the case.
Well, it's not that many aren't aware of this situation already, but it's definitely a bleak picture that gets painted. Any light at the end of the tunnel from your perspective?
Well, I think there's a lot of hope for stem cells. There's stem cell research going on, NIH-sponsored, using stem cells for COPD. I'm very optimistic about that. The amazing thing about stem cells is that, first of all, that we have stem cells which are not rejected. They manage to avoid the usual foreign agent stem cell research type of thing, or the foreign agent rejection. We don't find that with the mesenchymal cells that are being used to make stem cells. And also, even more amazing is the fact that they seem to know where to go. They seem to know what part needs to be corrected. So for patients who have heart disease, for instance, they go to the heart and they find a home for themselves in the cardiovascular tissues, and they will even reproduce there. We don't know whether they'll have to be continuously provided. That's to say that the number of cells that you put in will gradually decline with time, and they have to be replenished, as it were, or whether they will actually create a clone of themselves and act as fully developed myocardial cells. But the same thing seems to happen for patients who have COPD, that the stem cells go there as well. And how they do that is obviously something to do with recognition of cell surface antigens by the host. And they say, come here, we'll give you a good home.
Is that what they do?
Who knows? But it seems like that's what's going on, which I think is very, very fortunate and very, very hopeful in terms of development. We obviously still have a long way to go with stem cells. The research that's being done sponsored by NIH goes over several years. I'm talking of decades now. And there is always the concern that you might be introducing something which happens to have very adverse effects and takes over the host, as it were. A graft versus host type of disease, which would be terrible if that were to be the case. But fortunately, nothing like that has happened so far. So I think that's really quite promising. Unfortunately, I don't think I'll be alive by the time it becomes available, because this is going to take a long time to develop. Other than that, well, there's all kinds of molecules. The phosphokinase inhibitors, for instance, there's some rationale for each of them. It's not clear whether any of them will actually come to fruition. Most of those agents will, as they have been doing in the past, they will die in development. But I'm hoping that we will get one or two that will look promising enough for drug companies to pick them up.
Well, Dr. Gross, any closing thoughts for this interview? We've covered a lot of territory. Anything you want to add before
Well, I
we
don't
wrap
want
up?
to be depressive too much. It's all bad news. It's not all bad news. I think the fact that there are 30 or 40 different companies at this convention is in itself good news. It means that companies are still interested in making and selling their drugs, and I hope that continues for a long time.
Perfectly put. Well, I've been speaking with Dr. Nicholas Gross. He's volunteer staff physician at St. Francis Hospital in Connecticut and emeritus professor of medicine and molecular biology at Loyola University in Chicago. He's also clearly the inside man for all things COPD, and we've been a pleasure talking to him today at CHEST.